From Avinu, Padre querido, Luz de Israel. We had a beautiful opportunity at the Parliament to be with the Abrahamic reunion and to hear really moving, not speeches, but really people sharing their lives. And there were the Druze and the Bedouin and the Muslims and the Christians and our old friend Eliyahu McLean. And really, what was fascinating to me was to look around the audience and see that it was probably predominantly a non-Jewish audience, with a mixture of us. We had many renewal rabbis at the Parliament, probably at least 30 of us. And we were fortunate enough to spend Friday night and Saturday morning together, davening and eating and talking and so on. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Parliament because it was like living in the Olam Haba, the world that's coming. There were 10,000 people there, and they were so colorful because the Tibetans were there in their robes and the Africans in their wonderful colors. And a lot of Sikhs, there's a huge Sikh community in Salt Lake, and they call themselves Sikh. I tend to say Sikh. And they were doing a free lunch every day, cooking thousands of pounds of food. And it was really good. I didn't get to it, but I heard it was really wonderful. And there was just, there were pagans, Jews, and Muslims, and everyone walked around smiling and happy, even when the logistics weren't perfect, and open to each other and trusting. And I think we were getting that glimpse of what the world might be like if we could live in that kind of harmony together. I was very blessed. I did 3 presentations. I was part of the Women's Assembly the first day, and I was part of the closing ceremony. And then I did a Shekhinah workshop and was on a panel with great goddess teachers from Tibet and India and the Mormon area. She wasn't from Utah, she was actually from California. And there was just an incredible atmosphere of great trust and great beauty and goodwill. So what I wanted to start with you is for us to sing Shalu Shalom and to really be able to send the peace and the harmony, the cooperative spirit we have here in Boulder. And you know, I also live in a part of California that's like Gan Eden. We tend to take our peacefulness for granted. And I think that if we have it, then we need to be directed to pray in such a way that we can send more of that to all those different hotspots. Obviously, it's not just Jerusalem, that's very close to our hearts, but there's so many troubled places in the world. So for us all through this evening, my hope is that we can keep sending the energy, directing the energy. As Tirza told you, I have these 5 adult grandchildren and 6 small great-grandchildren. And my neighbors always ask me, especially when there's a pigua, when there's a terrorist attack, they say, "Don't you worry?" And I said, "I don't worry, I pray." And so you pray, you act, you do, you give money, because worrying by itself doesn't do it. Being concerned leads you, and here's another person who was at the Parliament, being concerned, being aware. I live in an area where there's a lot of New Age thinking, and a lot of the people in the groups in California say, we never read a newspaper, we don't listen to the radio, we don't want to know what's happening. And I say, we have to know what's happening. You have to be conscious so that exactly you know what to pray for and how to direct your prayers. It really makes a difference. So please sing with me. Shalu Shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalu Shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalu Shalom, Yerushalayim. Jerusalem must live in peace. Shalom, Salam. Shalu Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Israel. Pray for the peace of Ishmael. Pray for the peace of all the world. The whole world must live in peace. Shalom, salam, shalom, salam, shalom, salam, shalom, shalom, Yerushalayim. So for those of you who spent a lot of time in Israel, it's a good time to remember the wonderful experiences. You know, it's tough. I spent a lot of time in that Beersheba bus station. And it used to be like the parliament, you know, the Druze and the Bedouins and the soldiers and the people and the food. So how do we keep sending the positive? And for people like myself who have family, I've kind of been feeling today like we're still sitting Shiva, that we need for everybody to be like they are when they go to a house of mourning. Not to have a judgment ready or a solution ready, but to be present with what's going on. And for all the children, we need to be really focused on a future. And we need to continuously pray for all the inhabitants. We can't forget how many Ethiopians there are. We can't forget there are 50,000 Africans who are not Jewish and who have come to Israel for refuge. Can't forget how many Russians have come in, how many French are coming. It's like our vista has to include the Druze, the Bedouins, the Muslims, the Palestinians, the Israelis. We can't, I mean, we all start with our own family and our own community, but really it's the whole rainbow, if you want to call it that we need to be conscious of and praying for and doing for and supporting whatever little project there is. I don't know if you saw it today on the internet, but there's a guy who sells hummus in Netanya, and he decided that he would serve hummus free for any group that came in together. That included both Israelis and Palestinians. And without being a Pollyanna, you know, it's like we have to look to where the positive is. Because whenever we go to the negative, what we do, in effect, is we destroy part of the divine presence. The Talmud teaches that the Shekinah can't stay on earth. All the great Hasidic masters said that at the beginning of time, and if you read the Zohar on Bereshit, it says the same thing, that at the beginning of time, the garden was the divine feminine, and that everything in it was that expression. I had a chance to review the Zohar on Bereshit recently, and it said that Elohim, which is the code name for Bina, the upper Shekhinah, the mother, Leah, that Elohim wove together the whole world. The planets, the stars, the rivers, the oceans, the people, the plants, the animals, the fish, that she pours it out of the celestial womb. Any of you who've ever seen Judy Chicago's Birth Project, everything is pouring out of the upper divine mother into the cosmos. And so everything is coming down, and according to our sages, she's present fully in the garden. Of course, they say we messed it up, but she is present, she is fully present. And every time we engage in negative behavior, she has the option of going up, ascending, and living with the angels. Shekhinah is always surrounded by angels, but it's sort of like attract and repel. That's what the Talmud really talks about, how you give charity, the Shekhinah rests on you. You invite a guest in, like Judith invited me, the Shekhinah shines on you. You come into Nevei Kodesh to study with people, the Shekhinah is present. So they give us all the positives, which are basically the musar, charity, good works, study, tefillah, etc. But what's the other side of the coin? The other side of the coin, according to the Talmud, is pollution, violence, rape, and incest. This is a staggering list. It sounds very modern, right? That all violence is, in effect, the signal to the Shekhinah that it's time to do liftoff. How can you live with these people when they're doing this work? So we have like attract and repel. We have how we bring her in and how, unfortunately, she may decide to take a little vacation from us. So that's humanity's course, is how we embrace divinity. So the divine is in everything. I'm going to read you a little bit of a list I compiled a long time ago when I first started to study, actually. And these were attributes and names of the Shekhinah in the Zohar. These were mostly, actually, early Danny Matt. She is the Malach Elohim, the angel of God. She's the Pardes, the apple orchard. And later the Ari would teach us, if you want to experience the divine feminine, go into an apple orchard and breathe. It's that simple. She is the Knesset Yisrael, the community of Israel. She's the crown, the Atarah, the daughter of Levi, like Yocheved, the divine bride, the Kala we bring in on Shabbat, the Matrona, the Malchut, the divine mother, and she's the Sadeh, the field, and the Even HaShtiyah, the foundation stone, and the Garden of Eden, and so on and so forth. I could read you, I think I did 40. But basically, our teaching is that everything in nature is imbued with the divine presence. So the Ari again condensed it, and he said that the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, is in the stones, Hadomeh. Anybody thinks that stones aren't alive? Hang around for a while. Hatzameach, the plants. The animals, Habehema, and the humans, Hamadaber. So he said, we're not so different from all the rest. He probably was watching when the sun comes up, how the birds start to sing, and when the sun goes down, how the animals, I watch the sunset on the beach at night, and the animals all start to respond as the sun's going down. So you wonder, are they so different from us? The whole universe is a sentient universe. It's all vibrating. As Rabbi Zalman always told us, we found that out once we went to the moon and looked down, that this planet is alive. So we are in that position now where all the stuff we're doing, the pollution, the fracking, the fighting, it's like we're destroying the mother. And it's, a simplistic way of looking at it, and yet that is precisely what we're doing. We are destroying our home and her home. Everything that has come from divinity to us as a gift is really imperiled now. I think this is why at the Parliament there was so much material, so much discussion and education on water, on rain, on land, on vegetation. It was like a feast in a way of all these environmental concerns, but if you unify them, the real issue is sustainability. The issue is, are we going to stay on this planet, or is something else going to transpire that makes it impossible? It's still in our hands whether we're all going to live here. So I want to ask you to do a little exercise with me, and Susan's going to play the flute. I want you to think about internally where it is that you receive this energy. For me, I went from the East Coast to California, and every place I went, particularly Big Sur, it was like the mountains were talking, the rivers were talking, the ocean was talking. For me, it was some kind of visionary experience. And say, I don't have those anymore. I mean, I miss the 70s and the 80s. Really great messages from beyond. But not every, some people hear, some people see. For some people, they're animals. Judith probably gets it off Sadie, the dog. For some people, it's picking up a newborn baby. For other people, it's putting a plant into the earth. And for some of us, it's when you do a good deed and you help somebody and you get this rush of energy that takes you to a different place. And some people get it studying Torah, and some people get it in meditation. But I wanted to ask you to really spend a few moments with me, to go inside. Where is it, how is it that you experience Shekhinah, or whatever you call divine presence? Because the Shekhinah is the divine glue. She's the universal Devik. She holds everything together. She's the weaver and the web, and all beings are connected through her long before the internet. But it's like now that we have the internet, we can take it a step further to really understand that we are all part of this central energy. We have all come from this celestial womb. We are all vibrating, breathing, moving, digesting, feeling. Give yourself a little time to think about where and how the energy comes to you. Does it have a location or a time? Are there certain people that help make it happen? Is there a collective that you can go to get a boost? Are there some things you need to avoid in order to stay in this place? And do you yearn after it? Does your heart yearn for more? Do you sometimes feel like you're hungry and thirsty to add more, to be more? Once you feel a bit or see a bit, maybe your inner guidance will tell you how you can continue, how you can expand, how you can open to the flow, the Shefa of the universe. So my experience these days, especially on Friday nights after I light candles, I feel like the Shekhinah is just circling the planet on the Merkava and just throwing kisses everywhere of light and love. It feels to me like our great beings who have passed over with her. And that, this last month, it was like every day from before Rosh Hashanah on, it was that I was constantly feeling the Syrians, the migrants, the refugees, the situation in Europe, and this immense suffering. And at the parliament, one of the Hindu swamis, women, talked about our recognizing the dignity of suffering, that this is like the universal inheritance theme. And we keep, praying for everything to improve. And one of the things I also got out of it, I sat on an incredible panel at the parliament with a Hindu Swami, an amazing Buddhist teacher from Tibet, a Mormon feminist, a Wiccan teacher, myself. And there were also during the Women's Assembly a number of black ministers, and it was like everybody was saying, we want to get past that place of how we didn't know. I never heard about Shekhinah till I was 45. And what kind of experiences we had when we first got ordained, and the struggles, and the rejection, and the difficulties. It was like there was a voice calling out to go to a new place where we could nourish ourselves from our teachings and our history and our experiences, that we move it to a new level. And I always find it interesting, particularly in the interfaith panels, that people don't know that we have a divine feminine because we don't have statues. And until the modern era, we didn't have people painting what they think of as Shekhinah energy. We have literature, copious literature, wonderful concepts. And I'm always going back to the Sfirot, back to the tree, in order to teach people about the feminine. And always crave to do it simply and directly. So the place I go, and I go there with my book and my meditations, but also in meeting people, is into the desert, into the Exodus. Because the Shekhinah is Knesset Yisrael. She's the community of Israel. She is the aggregate. And I think, well, we're an aggregate, we're a community, you all are a community in Boulder, but it's hard for us to really be all together, physically, emotionally, spiritually, politically. And I think, well, that 40 years in the desert is our metaphoric journey together. And what happens in that journey, according to our Midrash and the Zohar, is that every aspect of nature emulates Shekhinah. So we go through the sea of reeds or whatever it is, and it's like we're being reborn. We're really born-again Jews. And so we go through the water. There's all this amazing Midrash, that when we went through the water, even the people who were maids knew more than the prophets. And that the babies were illuminated, and that everyone is like in some altered state as they are reborn through the water of the Sea of Reeds. And when we get to the dry land and we run out of food, we just have to go to the earth and pick up the manna. So we're in touch with the water and the earth. And as we proceed, we're marching, presumably, we're walking together, our shoes don't wear out, our clothes don't wear out. And every time we need to progress somewhere from one site to another, and the Torah tells you all those sites, that the clouds of glory lift up over the Mishkan. And that's our signal, break camp, let's go. And when they settle on the Mishkan, okay, we're gonna camp, you can go to sleep. So we've got the water, the earth, the air, the clouds, and we have the fire. There is supposed to be a pillar of fire, Amud Ha'esh, that goes in front of us and in back of us. Great Kabbalist Luzzatto says that it's possible that this is like a lantern that armies had in ancient times, but according to the Midrash, this is like magical light, fire, that is always directing us. It's like you have, your guidance is on 24/7. And so that to me is like the model. Exodus is the model for how we receive Shekhinah in nature. And of course, later we go onto the land and we do it through agriculture, and then we build a temple because we need to house her. The temple is supposedly lined with love, and that's her house, it's her abode. But until we cross over into the country, our entire experience of being brought out of slavery, being reoriented, reprogrammed, all our DNA is being done over, it's all happening through nature. We are vulnerable in nature, but we're also apparently united and protected. So the desert experience is, I think, a very uniquely Jewish kind of metaphor for how a group of people change their collective consciousness. Presumably, we're told that in Egypt we had sunk down. There are 50 levels of going up, and Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to have gone through 40 gates of ascension. You know, we're counting the Omer, we're doing that, but there are also supposed to be 50 gates downward. And according to the rabbis, we had sunk 49 out of 50, and that's why God took us out, because after that, we would completely blow it. So here we are, this group of people, whether this is myth and legend, or some of it happened historically, the real metaphoric process in Judaism is the desert. It's the Exodus. And that's like, when you think about it, every holiday, every Shabbat, you are doing the Kiddush and talking about Yetziat Mitzrayim. You know, how did you get out? How did you totally change who you are, how you lived, who you interacted with, who dominated your life? It's all about going into this collective vessel where you also have water because Miriam's well rolls along with you. And we need it in California now. But that's, so it's like all of the elements are covered. So what is it that transpires when we're in nature and we're in the desert? So Dina's going to play for you one of the meditations on my CD in which we take the metaphoric journey into the desert. Fortunately, we don't have to stay 40 years. We stay 7 minutes, I believe. But it is, again, this reminder that we are carrying the divine feminine in the Mishkan, in the ark. And these clouds of glory are guiding us, the manna is feeding us, and we're having a totally different experience. There used to be a New Age teacher who said the Jews all came from the Pleiades, and we got put down in the desert. It's kind of an interesting idea, you know, that there's something about that desert journey that totally changes us. Even if we go into the land and we lose some of it, there is something that transpires. And I guess my feeling is, because we tend to go, especially when there's a crisis in Israel, we tend to go into our divided place. We want to judge, we want to have solutions, we want to do something. And it's so hard to keep the collective. In my community, during the whole process of getting to the Iran agreement, we had speakers who came and who really put it out that those of us who supported the agreement, we were betraying the Jews, we were the enemy of the people, we were violating the Holocaust. I mean, it led to the most awful arguments. It was almost like we lost our center, like we were spinning out of control and into this incredible machloket. And then our local rabbis had to backtrack and try to calm everybody down later and make peace. But it's so easy for us to lose the center. I mean, and we could all sit here and speculate. Is it because we're such a wounded people? Is it because we've been exiled so often? You know, the Tibetans come to where I live, they come to the Santa Cruz Mountains. Excuse me. Digress for a moment. I meet them very often right after they've come. They're living in trailers. Some of them walked over from Tibet to Dharamsala or were carried. But they're smiling. Mm-hmm. And they're calling me mother. And I think, well, why are they so different? And I think, well, they've never been exiled before. This is a first. Sure, it's their philosophy and it's their religion. And the Dalai Lama says, they got my country, I'm not going to give them my mind. But we have experienced this process over and over again. We have experienced the woundedness, the exile, the division, the loss. So I think what happens to us when there's a crisis is that we lose it for a little while. And so that's why I want you to take this little journey into the desert, just as a reminder that we have that potential for being the one heart and the one soul that we were at Sinai. We do have that potential to really care about each other and love each other. Amen. And we really have to watch out for the times where it spins out real fast, because we become counterproductive. So you'll notice when we talk about these symbols of Shekhinah in the desert that there's no gender attached. They're all in the neutral, if you will. And what's interesting in the evolution of the Shekhinah in Jewish thought is that it really starts off with Onkelos in the 1st century developing the term because he thought his colleagues were too anthropomorphic, and he wanted a term that would feel more neutral. And so our early work projects that the Shekhinah resides in the patriarchs and the matriarchs, and the Shekhinah comes to us through nature in the desert. And then when we're exiled in Bavel, we begin to get a picture of the Shekhinah as feminine when the prophet Jeremiah and others talk about her lamenting the destruction of the temple and going into exile with us and being our mother and taking us under her wings. But it's still not really feminine, because the Talmud is more focused on ethics and practice, that you receive the divine presence through charity and good works and study and religious observance and so on. And it continues to evolve, because in the medieval period, the great sages like Rabbi Eliezer of Worms and his teacher Yehuda Chassid, they imagined the Shekhinah as light and prayer. And for them, it was like the Shekhinah was the energy of the prayers going up to the heavens. I've always thought it's because they had those medieval synagogues that were like churches with big pointed spires. But for them, the Shekhinah was present in heaven and receiving the prayers. And sometimes they used gender terms. The Shekhinah was bringing the prayers to the throne of glory, to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, or beyond that, to the Ein Sof. So they were beginning to have a little bit of that feminine, and we don't know why it is that the feminine starts to appear a little bit in the Sefer Bahir, but really arrives fully with the Zohar. And it's with the Zohar that the great mystics begin talking about the Shekhinah up in Bina, the great womb of the world, where all the souls come from and where we go back into Shuvah. That's what we do Yom Kippur. We're asking that we can go back. When I went to Petra, before I kept seeing these pictures of the treasure house. I thought it was a bank. It was like the treasure house of souls. It was where some of their great leaders were buried. So there's the idea that, well, we come from this Tzror HaChaim, from this treasure house of souls in Bina, Elohim, the great mother above, and she's sending the energy down to Shekhinah in Malchut, and on the way, she's there in Gevurah as sometimes the destroyer, and she's there in Hod as that elegant aspect of feminine. So it's with the Zohar that some kind of ancient future drama takes place. I mean, these guys were probably meditating together, doing cosmic travel, right? They did all kinds of wild stuff together. I think they just went home occasionally to sleep. There's an amazing book by a scholar at the Reconstructionist Seminary. It's called Mystical Bodies, Mystical Meals. And I'll have a 30-second lapse before I think of his name. And it's really brilliant. It's all about how they ate together and what kind of rituals they did and the incredible significance of food. I haven't met him. I sent a message to him with his nephew who sat with me on El Al one day. And I kept reading it and thinking, where's the menu? You know, there's nothing about what they ate. And then the light went on. Of course, the women were doing the food. But it's the most brilliant book about the importance of food among Jewish mystics and the kind of reverence and ritual that they brought to it. But it is with the Zohar that God the Mother really appears. And you know, Arthur Green, in one of his wonderful books, in Ehiyah, he talks about the idea that they were influenced by Christianity and Mother Mary. I don't really agree with Arthur, although he's so brilliant, hard to disagree with him. But I think that there is some gateway in the universe that opened to them, that enabled them to bring back the memory of Asherah, Inanna, Isis, Astarte, Demetra, you know, Persephone. It's like every culture had these, you know, incredible goddess legends. And I think something was happening there, that a kind of big shift in consciousness, that somehow their imagination opened up. And I don't know that women were treated any better. I like to think their wives had much better sex life, because their whole view was that it's bringing together the divine masculine and the divine feminine that will heal the world. That the world's out of harmony, we're spinning out of control, and if we can unite Tiferet and Shekhinah, if we can bring them together in this great heterosexual, it's almost all heterosexual, but they also talk about the union between Bina and Malchut, and that the upper mother and the lower mother, that when the mother and daughter energies come together, that is also the great healing. But seriously, they're obsessed with sex. I mean, in that they see this kind of cosmic drama in which the masculine and feminine have become distant from each other. And this is long before feminism, right? So it is from the 13th, late 13th, early 14th century on that we begin to have this whole concept of Shekhinah as divine feminine. And it takes the concept we had. Shekhinah is God's energy in that lower hay on the Yud Hey Vav Hey. It is God's presence in the world. It is the gateway that a human being can walk through and experience the divine. You don't have to cross over to the next world in order to get it. It's right here. So they're taking that notion that divine presence is truly available to everybody, but they're taking it into that ancient future place that somehow the availability of the light and the prayer and the God energy is inherently the feminine. So maybe it was the model of the good mother, maybe it was chivalry, maybe it was some incredible breakthrough, right, that transpired there. And we really, from, say, the 14th through the 17th century, we get waves. We get waves of the great Jewish mystics. Despite the Inquisition, despite the expulsions, you know, we've been through this. I've been thinking about you know, the Syrians and the Sudanese and everyone who's on the road now. When was there a migration like that? One of the great migrations was right after the Spanish Inquisition. There were hundreds of thousands of Jews on the road, and they were abused, they were exploited, they were killed. They were often paid huge amounts of money to pirates, just like those guys are doing it now, to take them on ships to destinations they often didn't reach. They followed Shabtai Tzvi, believing he was possibly the Messiah, and along the way they were robbed, they were raped, they lost everything. And I mean, it's staggering to think of the number of people who walked across Europe. I mean, some of them may have had some form of animal, you know, cart, but by and large, they were walking. And so, you know, we think of the end of the Second World War, this huge, huge outpouring. But somehow, despite all the suffering then, we end up with a group of mystics in Tzfat, in Israel, who, you know, then proceed to give us Shabbat HaMalkah, of the Shekhinah appearing to us in the Shabbat, and the Shekhinah being present in the house, and as we're cooking, and as we're preparing. It's like a story that gets a new chapter all the time. It's a constantly evolving story. I wrote a piece for, I guess it's a festschrift that Reb Goldie is assembling. I haven't heard back. But I wrote a piece on the evolution of the Shekhinah in Reb Zalman's thinking. And I essentially did what I should have done years ago. While he was alive, I wasn't reading the books that much. I was talking to him on the telephone. Now I'm reading the books. I'm going back. And, you know, there wasn't a lot that he wrote on this subject, but if you look through the books, you find certain themes that really hint also at this evolution of the Shekhinah. And so we get much more from the Tzfat mystics that really elaborates on the whole tree of life. And also it brings the feminine in a very real way. And then they too, you know, their era is over, and who's going to pick up the story? The Hasidic masters pick it up. And they say, oh, you don't have to be educated, you don't have to know the Zohar. You know, if you sing to God and you dance and you do good deeds, the Shekhinah will light up your face like the Baal Shem's daughter. And it's available to everybody and anybody. So they bring her down to earth again. They put her into community again. And so again, we have crisis in Europe, we have pogroms, we have the Holocaust. And so Reb Zalman was also teaching us that with the loss of great teachers in the Holocaust, we had kind of a break in consciousness, and that this was why so many Jews got spiritually disconnected, couldn't get past the suffering in order to re-engage, that there is so much sorrow and anger and loss. But really, the 20th century finally brings the women out. And if you look at the books that have come out since the 70s, there have been poetry, music, theater, dance, huge amount of writing, and also the entry of women into the rabbinical seminaries and the cantorial programs. Women are the majority now in the cantorial programs, and they're 50% in the rabbinical programs. So we're parallel with the Christians and the Buddhists in certain ways, that they too have been bringing women into leadership positions. But if you think about it, Jews in less than 40 years have brought women on the bima, have honored women to go to the Torah, have recognized women in the pulpit, and are listening to women's voices in all but the extreme Orthodox. To me, it seems like our culture has been very quick to respond to what has really been a revolution within Judaism. And people may not articulate it. We do, who write about it. Our articulation is, this is the other half of the Jewish genius. That's what Cynthia Ozick called it. And when we came out, we brought the new energy with us. And I think our institutions have woken up enough to know that that new energy is very positive. And so it linked with feminism in the 70s. It became a dual message in effect. But now we're in the 21st century and we don't see yet where is it going to go. We really, it feels like it is combining with the movement for real concern about climate change, the crisis with water, the crisis with earth, the violence. It looks like that's where we're going. But I would say it's still not that clear, you know, where we are taking it. Because we're just really putting the roots down in a way for a Judaism that is informed by both men and women, by people who are learned and people who are just inspired or brought to it from their own inner life. And we're starting to have a spiritualized Judaism. But if you think about it, the renewal movement's not that old. How old are we, Teresa? We're less than 40 years old.
Yeah, about 40.
And we like to think we're growing and bringing in new people, but every renewal group I meet has the same question. How do we bring in the youth? How do we educate the children? So there's like another great saga ahead of us that we haven't yet figured out. So what I want to do with you is a prayer that I do quite frequently. We were going to do it earlier. But what I recommend, especially in times of challenge, is for people to do Ana B'Koach. Ana B'Koach is our prayer for releasing obstacles. And I spend a lot of time also in the Hindu ashram. And in a Hindu setting, when you start the service, the satsang, you automatically start with the Ganesha prayer, because this is the deity that releases obstacles. That's how you start. I thought we'd bring it more towards our ending. But we've been doing Ana B'Koach like Friday night. It's in our Siddur. And a lot of people sing it kind of like it's Freilich. I have this argument in my renewal group at home. They sing it like it's rah-rah. And Ana B'Koach is asking God to listen to you, to be totally present for you in untying the knots that are in you, in your community, between the Israelis and Palestinians, in the world. You can use Ana B'Koach in virtually any situation. I have to admit, I use it a lot in airports, but I started using Ana B'Koach repetitively when I worked with people with AIDS, because sometimes people were so incredibly sick, but they couldn't die because too much had happened that they were still hanging on to, or people were hanging on to them. And I started doing Ana B'Koach in my car, on the street, at home. And so I really love it. And I also find it's a prayer that doesn't it doesn't specify only the Jewish people. Ana B'Koach has potential for, I think, for a more universal application. And I think we need to look, it's easy to look at other people and see where they're stuck. It's very easy for us to look at what's going on in the Middle East and see, you know, where governments are stuck, where people are stuck. And so I think that in addition to the political action that we take, we really need to pray for that disengagement of limited thinking, that undoing of whatever we're still carrying from the past. You know, I now have all these great-grandchildren. I'm becoming an ancestor. And so I say, I can't think anymore about what my parents did or didn't do for me. My parents are in heaven, and I get only good messages from them now. I have to think about what impact do I have now. Not just on my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. I have to give up whatever the old stuff was about whatever wasn't done, was done. It's like, it's becoming irrelevant. And, you know, so aging does some good things for you. Rabbi Zalman taught us in the first Aging and Saging book that we have to recontextualize our lives and we have to forgive everybody and everything, pretty much every day. And I think that's still a really good formula. Haven't found anything that works better. A constant process of forgiveness. And there's so many offenses in the universe, you know, and we go through Yom Kippur, and sometimes we forgive other people, we don't forgive ourselves enough. 3 years ago, I was asked to give the opening talk at Kol Nidre at Chachmat Alev, where I'm often at in Berkeley for Yom Kippur, with my friend who was their rabbi, Rabbi Leah Novick, and I spoke about self-forgiveness. And I found in the process of doing the research for that talk, very little in Jewish sources. I had to go to Jung and contemporary psychologists and New Age teachers. We had a little bit, but we didn't have a lot on self-forgiveness. So for me, that's like part of this continuum, that we do the work, we take the action, however we're doing it. Vigils, checks, signing ads, sending money, whatever you're moved to do, but also that process of continuously cleansing our own souls so that we're able to really send the prayers up. I love the visionary aspect of the Zohar. The Zohar says that the chief angel, Metatron, who's sometimes called the boy who hangs out with the Shekhinah, that Metatron and Sandalphon come and they collect your prayers, especially the Amidah, and they take them and they weave a crown for God. And I thought, wow, this was enough to get me out of my deck every morning. I live with a lot of non-Jewish people, but they know when they see me on the deck. I have a neighbor who was very sick, and when she'd see me on the deck, especially if I'm in my talit, she'd say, oh, I know you prayed for me today. But this notion that our prayers travel, that there is a universal pathway, and that somehow there is a divine source where all the prayers are collected, and that they're actually heard and responded to. And I think before the computer, that would have been very hard to imagine. But because of the technology, I think we can imagine that collectivity of prayer, that there's these circuits, right? These circuits that are going all the time. And that we kind of, I sometimes think that we might get to a point where we could cruise, where we wouldn't have to be steering all the time. But you know, when you're in a good group, you know how you get carried along? When people come to see me and they say, I can't meditate, I want to, blah, 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 I say, well, join a group. You meditate with a group, and something happens. Look at this group right here, that the collective energy carries even the people who struggle with meditation. And then you get better at it, and you meditate by yourself every day. So somehow there is this great avenue of prayer. And when we do the Ana B'Koach, I think it just helps us to imagine how we could transform. So I'll do it in Hebrew, but I'll give kind of simultaneous English for those who don't have the Hebrew, and then we'll take a break and then do discussion and so on. And I think Susan's going to give us a little flute with this. Yeah. Poor Susan. I changed the outline. I always do. So Ana B'Koach was written by a first-century scholar, we are told, named Netunya ben Hakana. And he was very, very magical, very mystical, magical, powerful. And he wrote it at a rough time when the Romans were there. And it is the 42-letter name of God that we put around amulets, and it's the unpronounceable name. And so when we do the Ana B'Koach prayer, we are really articulating the 42-letter name of God. And all of you know that it's when we sing the God names and pronounce them and chant them and daven them that something special opens in the universe. Ana b'koach gedulat yamincha tatir tzevua. Oh, answer us, Great One, and send all of your power into untying the knotted places in our beings. Kabel rina damcha, sagbeinu tareinu nova. Hear the song of your people, uplift us and purify us, Great One. Na gibor darshe yechudcha kevavat shomreim. You are the Great One. We try to understand your uniqueness, so we ask that you regard us as if we were the iris of your great eye. Borchem tahareim rachameim tzidkatecha tamid gamleim. Bless us, purify us, have compassion on us. We seek to fulfill your justice. Chasin Kodesh berov tuvcha nahal adatecha. Guide our group. Yachid geya lemancha zachrei kedushatecha. Turn your countenance towards us, we who wish to remember your sacredness. Shavatenu kabel, ushmat zakotenu, Yehodei talumot. Receive our requests, listen to our cries. You know all of our secrets. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Moed Le'olam Moed. So we ask, as we do every morning in the Tefillah, Machazir Shekhinah L'Tzion, may your Shekinah rest upon Zion, upon all of us, upon this holy building, upon all the beautiful people here, and upon everyone that we encounter. Amen. Thank you. So, what's the minhag here?
We infuse you with Shekinah energy. Thank you.
There's a teaching in the Zohar that if you go out on the road to teach, that the Shekinah goes with you and enlarges you, enhances you. So I've been on the road for a while, and I believe it's true.